Welcome to Imagining an Authentic 21st Century U.S. Left. My name is Paul Street. I write for Truthdig, I write for Counterpunch, I write for Consortium News, I write for Black Agenda Report, and a few other places I forgot about right now. My most recent book's called They Rule, The 1% versus Democracy. If you want to know more about my resume, to quote the immortal words of Shaquille O'Neal responding to Charles Barkley, Google me up. I get to go first because this panel was my idea. My opening comments, I'm going to stick mainly to the first provocation. There were recruitment attempts in that regard. There truly were, trust me. And we had a lot of scheduling issues that got in the way of that happening. I'm going to stick to this first provocation, to an assessment of the actually existing so-called left. I have my own ideas on what is to be done. I'm going to hold off on those until the end, maybe even until the Q&A. I don't want it to go on too long before we get to Glenn, Bruce, and Chris. In 1848, Marx Engels wrote that the class struggle between producers and appropriators always ends either in a revolutionary transformation of society at large or in the common ruin of the contending classes. Folks, common ruin is precisely where we are headed 170 years later as capital turns the planet into a giant greenhouse gas chamber of crime, by the way, that will make the Nazis look like small-time thugs by comparison. The rich, Hervé Kempf pointed out a decade ago, are destroying the earth. Well, not the earth itself, just all chances for a decent, organized human future. The bourgeoisie, if I might use a forgotten term, isn't doing this because it's loaded with ecological Scrooges who need to be visited by the ghosts of environmental Christmas past, present, and future. Capitalists are driven to pillage, poison the commons by systemic imperatives, compelling them to commodify everything under the sun, to maniacally push infinite growth, permanent accumulation on a finite planet. For any authentic left today, as for Marx in his time, the moral predisposition of bourgeois elites is of little concern. It's not about speaking truth to wealth and power. There's no appealing to capitalist better angels where money and profit are concerned. We're not trying to act out a Charles Dickens novel where Mr. Brownlow saves the day for young Waif Oliver Twist, or where the mean capitalist Scrooge becomes the nice benevolent capitalist Scrooge. Real leftists know that 5 absurdly rich people holding the same net worth between them as the bottom half of the species is capitalism working. That's the system working. The top 10th of the upper 1% possessing as much wealth as the nation's bottom 90%, owning most of the nation's politicians and policymakers along with the media, most of the educational apparatus. Folks, that's the system working. Returning to its 500-year inegalitarian plutocratic norm. We know that giant corporations buying up nearly every last family farm, tapping every new reserve of cheap global labor, stealing the Congo's precious raw materials, crafting so-called public policy in their own private interest, extracting, burning every last fossil fuel. We know that's capitalist working. The military-industrial complex generating profits for so-called defense firms and concocting pretexts for endless imperial intervention while our schools and parks and infrastructure and social safety nets are underfunded. That, people, too, is capitalism working. I could go on and on in this vein. The only solution a real left would know, along with Marx, who, by the way, turned 200 on May 5th of this year. It's amazing, 200 years and still kicking. I know Chomsky's almost 90, but I mean 200, please. The only solution a real left, along with Marx, knows is for workers and citizens to organize collectively to overthrow the profit system, to take control of what they produce, how they produce it, how society is organized. Power to the people, power to the workers, and power to the commons whose enclosure was and remains the making of the modern wage-enslaved working class, also the making of modern slavery, and the making of modern mass incarceration, curiously enough. This is what I've always understood to be the basic, irreducible, bottom-line perspective of anything since the time of Karl Marx, Frederick Douglass, and Bakunin to be the left. I'm always amused when I hear some reporter, some talking head, politician, pundit refer to, quote, the left. The left, as in the left won't like Trump's tax plan, or the left is gearing up for the 2018 midterms, the left this, the left that, all day long. You know, you should hear the stuff at my family gatherings from my in-laws about the so-called super out-of-control radical left. You know, people like Nancy Pelosi and Charles Schumer. All those hardcore workers' control advocates. What big, powerful left are they talking about? And by the way, where do I join? In the dominant reigning media politics culture, it refers primarily to the Democratic Party, but for anyone who knows anything about the actual history of radical movements, calling the dismal, demobilizing, dollar-drenched Democrats the left is like calling the National Pork Producers Association a vegan lobbying organization. As the multimillionaire House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi told a young Bernie fan during a CNN town hall last year, "We're capitalists and that's just the way it is." Presidential candidate Barack Obama gushed praise for the lords of capital and their glorious profit system, which he called a source of a prosperity that's unmatched in history. As president, his Goldman Sachs Citigroup vetted policy hands did more for the nation's leading financial institutions and corporations than any republic could ever dream of having done. And Obama was actually proud of this, boasted about it. He's been cashing in on it ever since. Many progressives call for the Dems to abandon their corporate and cultural elitism and return to its purported grand mission of, fighting for social justice and ensuring the workers get a fair deal, like back in the days of Franklin Roosevelt. When will the Democrats learn how to win? But it isn't about winning for the DDDs, the dismal dollar-drenched Dems. It's about serving corporate masters, as William Kaufman told Barbara Ehrenreich, believe it or not, on Facebook, but I noticed it and I saved it. It was just by chance. I was going through the feed. As he told her last year, Democrats aren't feckless, inept, stupid, unable to learn what it takes to win. They're corrupt. They don't want to win with an authentically progressive program because it would threaten the interest of their corporate donor base. The Democrats are full-grown adults. They know exactly what they're doing. They have a business model subserving the interest of the financial elite. So what if Bernie Sanders probably would have prevailed, or very possibly would have prevailed over Trump in 2016? The reigning corporate Dems would rather lose to the right, even to a proto-fascistic, white nationalist, eco-exterminist white, than lose to the left, even to a mildly progressive social democratic left within their own party. Russiagate, among other things, is the inauthentic opposition, as Sheldon Wolin called the Democrats, following its business model, doing its job, working to cover its tracks, and to throw the debacle of its neoliberal corporatist politics down Orwell's memory hole. Russiagate is meant to provide corporate Democrats cover, not only for 2016, but also for 2018 and 2020. It advances a narrative that lets Dems continue nominating business-friendly neoliberal shills and imperialists who pretend to be progressive while they are owned by the nation's unelected dictatorships of money and empire. This year's crop of congressional candidates is loaded with military and intelligence veterans, including in the district in Bloomfield where I'm staying during the left forum. The politicos are all meeting me and canvassing me on behalf of some woman who's running for Congress. And what's her great selling point? 10 years in the military. This is a reflection of the Democrats' determination to run as the true party of empire. Not that Bernie was all that left. Bernie F. 35 Sanders' occasional carefully hedged claims to be a democratic socialist were contradicted, I at least thought, in Iowa by his quiescence on the American empire. You know, it takes real chutzpah to trumpet Scandinavia as your social democratic role model without noting once that Sweden, Denmark, and Norway pay tiny percentages of their budgets on militarism. And failure to tackle the war budget, as Dr. King pointed out in 1967, means you can't pay for poverty-ending progressive transformation at home. Sanders has never seriously criticized modern class rule, deeply understood, and along the way he helped sustain, I think, progressives' deadly attachment to the nation's time-staggered, narrow, election candidate-centered politics. Howard Zinn used to say that the really critical thing isn't who's sitting in the White House, it's who's sitting in the streets, in the cafeterias, in the halls of government, and in the factories. And I'm afraid Bernie was and remains very much about the master's election cycle, which is dedicated to the delusional notion that we, the people, get meaningful input into policy by spending 3 minutes in a voting booth once every 2 or 4 years, choosing from among a handful of candidates selected in advance for us by the nation's unelected financial dictatorship. Democrats know that lots of citizens and activists think like Zinn. That's why they set up AstroTurf outfits like Indivisible, Move On, Town Hall Project, fake resistance groups masquerading as extra-electoral grassroots movements, but whose real purpose is to channel everything into a big get-out-the-vote campaign for candidates affiliated with the not-so-leftmost of the two reigning corporate parties. Now, a number of Sanders supporters have migrated into DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America. A lot of good people that I know are doing that. I looked at its online video, Thanks Capitalism, which seems to define socialism as little more than collective bargaining agreements and civil rights. The video says nothing about capitalism's destruction of livable ecology or about its evil twin, imperialism. There's a panoply of sometimes progressive, substantively progressive advocacy, policy, and service organizations that can be found across the country. They tend to be crippled by single issuism relating to their silo-inducing dependence on private foundations. There are many multi-issue, nonpartisan, progressive policy, lobbying, protest groups in the citizen action tradition across the country. Their 501c3 status prevents them from overtly identifying as Democratic Party affiliated groups. But that's pretty much what they are. Authentic radicals who want to keep their jobs know to tread carefully and watch their backs when they work in the progressive nonprofits sector. I have all kinds of stories about that. It's the same in higher education and the so-called labor movement. We've seen hopeful seeds and moments, and I participated in many of them, of people organizing over the years, briefly inspiring developments like the Wisconsin Rebellion, Occupy, Fight for 15, the Chicago subsequent statewide teacher strikes, the Verizon strike, the movement against racist police killings, which is a movement bigger than just the Ford Foundation funded and Borley Alice Foundation coordinated Black Lives Matter. There's been the Malcolm X grassroots movement, We Charge Genocide, Standing Rock, the broader struggle that I was part of in Iowa against the Dakota Access Pipeline, the successful campaign against the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and I think the remarkable alternative economy developments led by black leftists in Jackson, Mississippi. Which to me is one of the most really remarkable and hopeful developments going on right now. Now we have the Poor People's Campaign just under the way, under the leadership of Reverend William Barber. I know other panelists are going to talk about the PPC, and I'm going to leave any comments I have on that till later. I will say this though, in his final years, Dr. King, leader of the original Poor People's Campaign, became less and less reluctant to name the disease that was causing poverty as capitalism. He acknowledged that he was fighting what he called a class struggle. The real issue Dr. King, who's been sanitized in the official American Orwellian historical memory and who in fact was a democratic socialist. The real issue to be faced, King wrote in his very last essay, posthumously published, is the radical reconstruction of society itself. For now, and this must change, the US left is too scattered, excessively siloed, overly dependent on corporate foundations, excessively episodic, excessively metropolitan and bicoastal, excessively professional and middle class, insufficiently working class, insufficiently anti-capitalist, and insufficiently distanced from the Democratic Party, and excessively, I think, identity politicized. I'm not against identity as part of our political practice, but there's a left way of handling identity, and there's a neoliberal bourgeois way of handling identity. Now, I will say this, in some hyper-identity politicized so-called left circles now, you are damn near suspected of being a racist or a sexist and or a homophobe for using the phrase working class. Or for preferring the time-tested, easily understood word solidarity over the somewhat confusing academic term intersectionality. Some so-called left folks will look at you like you're a demented Stalinist dinosaur if you dare to observe that not every single last white American in the country is super privileged simply because of the color of their skin. I get resistance from so-called lefties in campus town America when I suggest spending less time shaming white working class people for their color privilege and more time on appealing to their basic economic class interest in forming solidarity with their fellow workers of different races and ethnicities. There's nothing wrong with appealing to self-interest and economic class interest. In the campaign against the Dakota Access Pipeline in Iowa, I was taken aback by how many activists seemed coldly disdainful to the question of how can we find jobs for people employed in the fossil fuel sector after we move to alternative energy. I get it. There's no jobs on a dead planet. But why not tell working people and unions that, as economist Robert Pollin has found, clean energy generates more jobs for a given amount of investment than does maintaining a country's existing fossil fuels infrastructure. And I am wrapping up here. The absence of a serious, sustained left is dangerous as hell. I think much more than many people understand. People who are getting shafted and who know it are going to get behind militant politicos seeking to channel their understandable rage. If there's no effective, durable, through thick and thin, organized, intelligent, anti-capitalist left around, the job of working with that popular anger falls by default to xenophobic, white nationalist, neo-fascist, reactionary populists, to the Marine Le Pens, the Geert Wilders, the Matteo Salvinis, the Nigel Farages, the Norbert Hofers, the Sebastian Kurzes, the Alexander Golands, the David Dukes, the Steve Kings, the Jeff Sessions, the Donald Trumps, and the Steve Bannons of the world, because resentment abhors a vacuum. Without a functioning left ready to fight, do real things for everyday people, we will have no way to defend and sustain our households, our families, and communities when the next big capitalist meltdown comes, an event that is overdue and coming in the very near future. Meanwhile, with or without a financial crisis, capitalogenic, I try to get people to move off of anthropogenic and say capitalogenic environmental catastrophe looms closer with every passing year as talking heads obsess over this week in Trump and Russia. We are racing to the fatal mark of 500 carbon parts per million, per atmospheric million by 2050, if not sooner. The greenhouse effect is not rocket science. The planless, chaotic, growth-addicted profits system has brought us literally, to quote Chris Hedges, to the cusp of extinction if we don't get off the march to ecocide. Nothing else that we care about on the left is going to matter all that much. We're just going to be arguing about the more equitable sharing out and distribution of the pieces of a poisoned pie. We're going to be turning the world upside down, but unfortunately it's going to be a hopelessly poisoned world. That's historical materialism 101. It's socialism or barbarism if we're lucky. It's eco-socialism or annihilation sooner than many of us dare to acknowledge. If there's no future for a radical mass movement in our time, Istvan Massaros wrote 16 years ago, there can be no future for humanity ourselves. We have our work cut out for ourselves. Power to the people, power to the workers, power to the commons. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a reminder that we are not here in support of Donald Trump nor Brett Kavanaugh. That we are simply here in support of the Lord Jesus Christ.
Fuck Brett Kavanaugh!
I'm not here for Kavanaugh.
Fuck
I'm not here for Kavanaugh.
Fuck Brett Kavanaugh!
I'm not here for Kavanaugh. I'm here for your soul.
Fuck Brett Kavanaugh! Fuck Brett Kavanaugh! Fuck Brett Kavanaugh! Fuck Brett Kavanaugh! Fuck Brett Kavanaugh!
I'm not here for Kavanaugh. I'm here for your soul. You can think all you want about Kavanaugh. You can think all you want about whoever. You can think all you want about him. I'm here for your soul. Kavanaugh is not here right now. If Kavanaugh was here, I would preach him the gospel in the same way that I'm preaching to you the gospel. I don't know Kavanaugh. I don't know if he's a born-again Christian or not. I do not know. But what I do know is that most of you here are not born-again Christians. And that is why you need the glory of the gospel. The gospel is able to save your souls. Now there is a reason why God forbid for you to talk to unfamiliar spirits and the dead and be necromancy and doing all these things that are by nature demonic. There's a reason why. Because demons are the ones that deceive. They deceive. They beguiled you. You're like sheep without a shepherd.
I see, I'm not sure, I can't really count too well right now, but I'm guessing probably about 100 people here, if not more. Let me ask y'all something for a second. What everyone is gathered up here for, I'm seeing there's a whole business dedicated towards witchcraft, towards the dark arts. Let me ask y'all something. Do y'all truly believe in what you're gathered up here for? Because we do. We believe it's real.
Yeah.
We know it's real. This stuff is not to be messed around with. And yes, I'm hearing some cheering out there. But what you're telling me is that you're gathering for something of a dark nature.
life, so I know you can do stuff. My dad used to work at the GM plant up in Terrytown.
We're telling you, we're sounding
Thank you for your service. I'm looking the Jesus Christ.
That's why many of you have your faces covered right now.
You get power from them? How much sense does that make? You have joined the camp of a bunch of losers, folks. Unrighteous losers at that. Satan thought. Satan said, I will be like the Most High. I will ascend to the highest throne of the kingdom. I will be like the stars of heaven. He thought that he was, God created him.
Hosts a TV, a radio, a cable show called Let Them Talk. He's also a great investigative journalist who's worked for WBAI. He's also done articles for High Times and The Shadow. And he's here to give you a couple of words.
All right, Chris, thank you. Yeah, I have a show on WBAI every Thursday, 6:30 p.m., 99.5 FM. You can get it on SoundCloud. It's called Trump Watch with Paul DiRienzo. I got a TV show too, a bunch of stuff. Just look up my name with an E. You can find out information on what I'm into with Chris and the rest of us in The Shadow. And I tell you, it smells great out there, guys. It really smells good. I love the smell. Keep it going. Let's make it legal in New York in 2018. This year is the year we make marijuana legal in New York. Now, I'm not going to try and be louder than all you guys because you're way louder than me, but I'm going to try and get the idea out there as best I can. Now, marijuana, I'm going to talk about marijuana here because I smell it. It's May Day. May Day is the workers' day. Not all of us have jobs, but one thing all of us can do is smoke herb, and I know a lot of us are into it. And even if we're not into it, we understand why Philby should go to jail for it. We know we got to free the prisoners of pot and all the drug war prisoners, people who have put in prison and had their lives ruined for herb.